So according to the rules of the so-called wage gap, where women are paid less for the same exact goddamn job as men, only because they're women. You see, it's the oppression, it's feminism, it's double plus good. The Washington Post pounds this shit into the heads of soft, mushy feminists. I'm oppressed. When it's simply not true. When you account for various factors, I'm not going to go through the whole thing. You get it. People are paid the same. There's an earnings gap. Some people work more. Some people work less. It's an earnings gap. So enough on that bullshit. But here we go with some sweet reportage in the Daily Caller. The Washington Post rips its own employees' union, calling it a seriously flawed report. Whoa. Seriously flawed? I mean, we're just doing the wage gap as advertised by the feminists. You take all of the salaries of the men and you average them and the women and you average them. That's what the wage gap is. Washington Post. Why would you rip something you promote on a daily, hourly, minutely fucking basis to show Wammens how oppressed they are? Why would you object to that? The Washington Post is at odds with its own employees over a report alleging racial and, of course, sex-based pay disparities among Post employees. Anyone remember the Audi commercial from a couple of years ago? Remember that with the young girl driving the car? And, oh, it's so horrible. The women aren't paid the same. And when some enterprising reporter called Audi and said, excuse me, how can you get away with paying men and women differently for the same job when we've had the Equal Pay Act of 1963 in effect for, 56 years? And of course, Audi, no, we didn't mean us. We meant people like Trump. Look at Trump's salary compared to the lowest earning woman. She should get the same as him. Everybody should be paid the same no matter what. What about Google? Google sued, piss, moan, blah, blah, blah. Women are paid less, and they actually found out in the one category it was men being paid less for the same fucking job in violation of the Equal Pay Act of 1963. So Google had to quickly write some checks to some men who weren't being paid the same as the Wammens. Let's not talk about that, though. So the paper's union alleged in a report Wednesday that the Post underpays non-white employees compared to white employees. But the Post's vice president of communication called the report seriously flawed. I wonder if they looked at what an Asian man or an Asian woman gets paid compared to whitey. No, that wouldn't keep the narrative up, would it? Says here, collectively, employees of color are paid less than white men, even when controlling for age and job description. But what about years of experience? What about talent? What about all those other things you could take into account to find out that people are paid the same wage when they're doing the same job, but there's differences because of experience? No. If you say that as a man, you're a misogynist woman hater. Clearly you want the patriarchy and you want all that shit. You hate women. You're not a feminist. And so we get down a little farther in the story. Women as a group are paid less than men in the newsroom. No. As we all know, they earn less because they fucking work less. It's just that simple. So what does the vice president of whatever the fuck, Christine Coriatti Kelly, what does she have to say? Well, she said the Post is committed to paying employees fairly for the work they perform, and we believe that we do so, taking into account relevant factors like position, years of experience, and performance. Miss Kelly, the wage gap, which is on your newspaper's pages every fucking day, doesn't take into account any of that. We are to believe that this average reflects women being paid less for the same fucking job. Women, in general, earn less because they work less. I know. Years of experience? Fuck that. She's fresh out of college. Pay her the same as the guy or the woman who's been here for 10 years. In other words, this is all bullshit, but it is a sweet, sweet, it's almost like the smell of some fresh zombie kush firing up in my bong. This is the bullshit you promulgate. And now they're coming back and saying, hey, wait a minute. We're going to use that bullshit and say you don't pay women and men the same because that's sexist and racist and whatever the fuck. And of course, Ms. Kelly understands it is a little more complex than averaging out the salaries of all men and all women. And by the way, the CEO of the Washington Post, Jeff Bezos, his salary is less than the average female salary. Isn't that discrimination? Isn't that somehow... Oh, no. He's an evil whitey. I'll put the link below. James Maxwell. Thank you for listening.